can't be practicing science unless you subject those hypotheses to testing, including debate. Otherwise, you're not practicing science.
It's a matter of trauma and psychological defense. Again, those sort of parts of the brain are mediated by lower subcortical areas. And those areas are actually much, much faster and far more powerful than, say, the prefrontal cortex, the logical parts of the brain, which we as humans tend to think guide the show. They actually don't.
They were using rhetoric that was deliberately fear-based. And why do we know that? Because we have releases, for example, the Behavioural Sciences Unit, the Nudge Unit of the UK, SAGE, who says we are deliberately going to use fear as a method of social control. So you can't tell me this is fumbling, you can't tell me this is accidental, and you can't tell me when you have the flow of policy and money going in certain directions that it isn't intentional.
You're abolishing informed consent. And informed consent requires that you hear all sides of the story. You have to hear the risks and the benefits, not just the benefits. And by excluding the risks, you had abolished a key part of medical ethics.
That puts the primary caregiver into the position of being unsafe. And that is one of the biggest existential threats a human can face. So what happens then is that possibility is repressed, and it's, again, driven down to these sort of unconscious areas. And a really important point here is because so many people say, why can't they see? They're so smart. And it doesn't matter about your level of intelligence. Yeah. So you could be emeritus professor of rocket science, and you can still be completely hoodwinked by this because it's different parts of the brain. And again, there's so many people saying, well, why can't they critically think? They're clearly not critical thinkers. You couldn't say that a professor of physics isn't a critical thinker. Of course they are, about their field. But that's a very different thing to how the rest of their consciousness is mediated in terms of these existential threats.
This speaks to your encounters with Labor politicians. There are those, for example, like if I was to speculate, I'd say Boris Johnson was taken aside at one stage and he was told, there's been some deaths in nursing homes. You don't want to be a headline. You've got a majority. You want to be Churchillian. Here's your opportunity. Hitler is a virus. You are Churchill. You can play upon that. And it plays upon his ego. And so so there are various incentives, whether it be power, avoidance of a bad headline, profit, avoidance of social exclusion. There are various, or just convenience. There's various, people have a sociometer that's attuned to what's good and comfortable and what's going to be punitive and painful. And they're going to go in the direction of self-interest, right? And that's what happened here, because you have 110,000 at last census medical practitioners in Australia. There's nothing special, and people that want, the doctors to speak out. We're a dime a dozen. There's doctors in every shopping mall. It's a big deal.
So are you saying those people would be less susceptible to fall for nudge unit techniques because they've been primed to be suspicious or critical?
Yeah. So
I put up a meme that where it had 15 signs that you may be in an abusive relationship. And I crossed out the word, relationship and put in the word government. And every single one of them ticked off. It's as if people who have experienced an abusive, narcissistic abuse were already onto this because they'd experienced it, they'd seen the gaslighting, they'd seen all the same techniques, that occur in an abusive relationship. And frankly, a lot of people have got a history or experience of this. And I think they're the ones who woke up early and saw what the government is doing is behaving like an abuser.
If you have, let's say, 85-year-olds, their infectious fatality rate at one stage I would have estimated to be something like 10%, right? Wow. Which is significant. Okay, very high. But the thing is that they might not be alive next year anyway.
Yeah.
And this is the body that is their private property and the life that is theirs. So if a bunch of 85-year-olds want to stop sheltering in place, and if they want to get together, even if it kills them, what business of it, of anybody, to say that they will intervene and stop them? These are ethical questions. This is why I'm saying that freedom is not data-driven. Ethics is not data-driven, right? And so we have to step back from this post-biopolitical, post-utilitarian state. I say it's post-utilitarian because we're assuming the ethical model in which we're operating without even questioning the choice of the model. Meta-ethically, we're not choosing the model. So we have to take a step back. We have to take a step back and examine things such as why is our policy data-driven, not ethically driven? Why our choice of ethical framework? Why are we descending into the safetiest hyper-regulatory culture where everything has to be answered by a data piece?
The vaccines are traditionally given to as a preventative, and it's given to a healthy population. You have to have a risk profile which is less than the risk that you're giving it for, And what was obvious early on was that there was the difference between an 83-year-old and a 13-year-old is like 1,000-fold difference in risk. It's 3 orders of magnitude.
1 on 24,000 is what you're quoting. If one died out of the 24,000,
it was already doubly more dangerous than those figures of risk for COVID.
Twice as deadly as COVID itself. Okay.
And I was asking, you better be looking. I wasn't saying it was going to happen. I was saying you need to, as health authorities, you need to be sure that the risk of what you're injecting is less than the risk of the condition for which you're injecting it.
You could argue on first principles that that bullying people and childhood trauma is neurotoxic. It is, right? Okay, but so what do you say? Because you can say theoretically then, an insult can be traumatizing to me. So you are actually assaulting my brain with your words. It's a microaggression. And so now you have to censor yourself. See, arguments can always be made in favor of more and more regulation and more draconian policy. And where does it end?